doing. I want to share with you a couple of stories this morning. I love to hear kind stories. And some of these you may have already heard. I know the first one probably you have. But it's called Caddy. This reading glasses. 20 years ago, I drove a cab for a living. It was a cowboy's life, a life for someone who wanted no boss. What I didn't realize was that it was also a ministry. And because I drove the night shift, my cab became a moving confessional. Passengers climbed in, sat behind me in total anonymity, and told me about their lives. I encountered people whose lives amazed me, ennobled me, made me laugh and weep. But none touched me more than a woman I picked up late one August night. I was responding to a call from a small brick fourplex in a quiet part of town. I assumed I was being sent to pick up some partiers or someone who had just had a fight with a lover, or a worker heading to an early shift at some factory for the industrial part of town. When I arrived at 2:30 a.m., the building was dark, except for a single light in a ground floor window. Under these circumstances, many drivers would just honk once or twice, wait a minute, and then drive away. But I'd seen too many impoverished people who depended on taxis as their only means of transportation. Unless the situation smelled of danger, I always went to the door. This passenger might be someone who needs my assistance, I reasoned to myself. So I walked to the door and knocked. "Just a minute," answered a frail, elderly voice. I could hear something being dragged across the floor. I hope it wasn't someone. After a long pause, the door opened. A small woman in her 80s stood before me. She was wearing a print dress and a pillbox hat with a veil pinned on it, like somebody out of a 1940s movie. By her side was a small nylon suitcase. The apartment looked as if no one had lived in it for years. All the furniture was covered with sheets. There were no clocks on the walls, no knickknacks or utensils on the counters. And in the corner was a cardboard box filled with photos and glassware. "Would you carry my bag out to the car?" she asked. I took the suitcase to the cab and then returned to assist the woman. She took my arm and we walked slowly toward the curb. She kept thanking me for my kindness. "It's nothing," I told her. "I just try to treat my passengers the way that I would want my mother treated." "Oh, you're such a good boy," she said. And when we got in the cab, she gave me an address and then asked, "Could you drive through downtown?" "It's not the shortest way," I answered quickly. "Oh, I don't mind," she said. "I'm in no hurry. I'm on my way to a hospice." I looked in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were glistening. "I don't have any family left," she continued. "The doctor says I don't have very long." I quietly reached over and shut off the meter. "What route would you like me to take?" I asked. And for the next 2 hours, we drove through the city. She showed me the building where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband had lived when they were newlyweds. She had me pull up in front of a furniture warehouse that she had once been to a ballroom where she had gone dancing as a girl. And sometimes she'd ask me to slow in front of a particular building or corner and would sit staring into the darkness, saying nothing. As the first hint of sun was creasing the horizon, she suddenly said, "I'm tired. Let's go now." We drove in silence to the address she had given me. It was a low building, like a small convalescent home, with a driveway that passed under a portico. 2 orderlies came out to the cab as soon as we pulled up. They were solicitous and intent, watching her every move. They must have been expecting her. I opened the trunk and took the small suitcase to the door. The woman was already seated in a wheelchair. "How much do I owe you?" she asked, reaching into her purse. "Nothing," I said. "You have to make a living," she answered. "There are other passengers," I responded, almost without thinking. I bent and gave her a hug. She held on to me tightly. "You gave an old woman a little moment of joy," she said. "Thank you." I squeezed her hand and walked into the dim morning light. and behind me a door shut. It was the sound of the closing of a life. I didn't pick up any more passengers that shift. I drove aimlessly, lost in thought, and for the rest of the day I could hardly talk. What if that woman had gotten an angry driver, or one who was impatient to end his shift? What if I had refused to take the run, or had honked once and then driven away? On a quick review, I don't think that I have done anything more important in my life. We're conditioned to think that our lives revolve around great moments. The great moments often catch us unaware, beautifully wrapped in what others may consider a small one. People may not remember exactly what you did or what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So true. So true. God really wants us to take the time out of our busy schedules to be able to touch other people's lives. And sometimes it's really difficult to do that because we think in our busyness, in our busy lives, that our stuff that we're dealing with is more important than other things. The next story is called Cookies. And this is a very good example of how you can love your enemy. A small boy at summer camp received a large package of cookies in the mail from his mother. He ate a few, then replaced the remainder under his bed, and the next day after lunch he went to his tent to get a cookie, and the box was gone. That afternoon, a camp counselor who had been told of the theft saw another boy sitting behind a tree eating the stolen cookies. That young man, he said to himself, must be taught not to steal. He returned to the group and sought out the boy whose cookies had been stolen. Billy, he said, I know who stole your cookies. Will you help me teach him a lesson? Well, yes, but aren't you going to punish him? Asked the puzzled boy. No, that would only make him resent and hate you, the counselor explained. I want you to call your mother and ask her to send you another box of cookies. The boy did as the counselor asked, and a few days later received another box of cookies in the mail. Now, said the counselor, the boy who stole your cookies is down by the lake. Go down there and share your cookies with him. But, he's the thief. I know, but try it. See what happens. Half an hour later, the camp counselor saw the two come up the hill, arm in arm. The boy who had stolen the cookies was earnestly trying to get the other to accept his jackknife in payment for the stolen cookies. And the victim was just as earnestly refusing the gift from his new friend, saying that a few old cookies weren't that important anyway. That's a great example of when someone slaps one cheek, you just give them the other side. When someone does something to you out of kindness, do something back. Don't hold grudges. Don't try to get them back. Don't be passive-aggressive. Just be kind, and God will take care of the rest. My last story is called Marbles. Have y'all heard these before? No? This is pretty good for Veterans Day, too. Hopefully everybody said a whole bunch of prayers on Thursday. It says, during the waning years of the Depression in a small southeastern Idaho community, I used to stop by Brother Miller's roadside stand for farm fresh produce as the season made it available. Food and money were still extremely scarce, and bartering was used extensively. One particular day, Brother Miller was bagging some early potatoes for me. I noticed a small boy, delicate of bone and feature, ragged but clean, hungrily appraising a basket of freshly picked green peas. I paid for my potatoes, but was also drawn to the display of fresh green peas. I'm a pushover for cream peas and new potatoes. And pondering the peas, I couldn't help overhearing the conversation between Brother Miller and the ragged boy next to me. Hello, Barry. How are you today? Hello, Mr. Miller. Fine, thank you. Just admiring them peas. Sure Sure look good. They are good, Barry. How's your mom? Fine. Getting stronger all the time. Good. Anything I can help you with? No, sir. Just admiring them peas. Would you like to take some home? No, sir. Got nothing to pay for them with. Well, what have you to trade me for some of those peas? All I got's my prize Aggie. Best tall around here. Is that right? Let me see it. Here it is. She's a dandy. I could see that. Only thing is, this one is blue. I decided I'd kind of go for the red ones. Do you have a red one like this at home? Not exactly, but almost. Tell you what, take the sack of peas home with you, and next trip this way, let me look at that red top. Sure will. Thanks, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Miller, who had been standing nearby, came over to help me. And with a smile, she said, there are 2 other boys like him in our community. All 3 are in very poor circumstances. Jim just loves to bargain with them for peas, apples, tomatoes, or whatever.